Alright, so this is a Class 3 Nuke file, and we're going to talk a little bit about keyers. Now, this is an advanced tutorial, but I want to make it available to even beginners in the sense that I want to introduce you to a little bit of the most famous keyers. The big top three, obviously, are Primat, and of course there's the other one, Keylight. And finally there's the dynamic duo, IBK Gizmo, IBK Color. So these are the biggies right here. Some people do prefer sometimes to use Ultimate, which is another one which actually can basically take out any webbing that would be involved in certain areas around a character if you're trying to create a core mat and so forth. So it does give you some really cool results. It's a little bit more complicated, but the big ones are Primat, Keylight, and these two. These two are usually good for fringe mats, or commonly called edge mats as well. And Primats are usually good for core mats, or kind of hard cores that we're going to create, which is the center piece that fills in the Swiss cheese holes of your atypical key. So let's go ahead and just kind of poke around with a couple of these here. Let's go ahead and start with Keylight. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and take this footage of Jessica, and we're going to go ahead and plug it in. As you can see, you have a background, out mat, in mat, source. I am not going to get in heavy detail to any of these because I want you guys to go straight to production. When I started in production and game design, I didn't have like theory or ideas or, maybe you could try this with this, maybe this will work. In production, you literally are thrown into the lion's den and you got to fight off the lion, and that's just basically the process of production. And we were given templates and best course of actions that you could say are very linear with not many options, but for the majority of the sake they work. So I will be introducing you to the Uber keyer, which will be a templated keyer which will have all of these sort of pieces. But just to be aware how the mechanics of these work, I'll just go ahead and put in source here to our footage, and there's plenty of tutorials on YouTube in regards to learning about this. I'll talk about them a little bit later, but I'm just going to go ahead and put this into the viewer, and here you can see we have our scene here, and you can see if I go ahead and slam the gamma, we have a variation of luminance in the green. So you can see we have a variation in, say, the actual luminance. It's brighter over here. It's a different value. So if I were to click Control click, you can see the values of red, green, and blue are different than here. This is like 0.72 in the green. It's 0.5 here. It's 0.04 in the red over here. It's 0.02 in the red over here. And over here it's like 0.06, and over here is like 0.04 in the blue. So there is a variance in color information between these two areas. So Keylight is good for scenes where there's a lockdown camera and you don't have the camera moving a lot, where the background plate would actually change. So if you have a lockdown tripod shot where the person's just walking along and the camera doesn't pan or tilt or dolly, this is probably the best tool to use sometimes for hair detail. But again, you can get this done as well with certain situations with IBK Color and Gizmo, which is the most popular of all the keyers. So I'm going to take the Keylight and click the little screen color here. And I'm going to go ahead and hold down Shift and Control, and you can see how it starts to do the disco here where it goes back and forth. And I want to hold down Control and Alt and click. If I hold down Shift, Control, and Alt, this is on a PC, I'm sampling the original image. If I don't hold down that, I'm going to get this and sampling the sample, so I don't want to do that. I want to make sure it's sampling the original footage and ignoring what has been changed. So I went ahead and sampled this area, and usually you want to sample area that's very close to the wispy hairs. And now if I hit A for alpha, you can see we have a pretty good reality here. You can see the difference in luminance. It's all based on the pixel value that we chose here. So whatever the chrominance value RGB of what we chose here is what it's keying, and you can see it just degrades over here. Now if we choose this area over here, you can see it does a really good job, but we might be losing some details. Remember, you can win the battle but lose the war when it comes to keying. You want to have that yucky, mucky motion blur, and you want to have these fine, wispy details. So you can see just by poking around, again, I have hit A for alpha to look at my alpha, I can kind of choose something that's a good middle ground. But one thing you notice, if I go over here and go, oh, that looks good, you'll notice I've lost detail in the hair over here. So if I click over here, you You can see I've gained this extra strand of here. So this is going to require a little bit of finessing. So I'm going to get kind of close here. And you can see I've got all these nice hair details. And at this point, we can go ahead and just do a couple things, such as screen gain, which is going to kind of pump that up just a little bit. You can see it's starting to eat away at the hair, which we don't want to tamper a lot with keys. I know that sounds kind of weird, but we don't want to get too crazy. And then the screen matte, we're going to go ahead and click that open, and we can click the black, and we can clip the white, and you can see it just becomes a crunchy, nasty edge. So as these two come closer to each other, as black gets closer to white, these two bars, two little knobs get closer, you're crushing the values. You're basically saying anything of a value of 2.95 in the RGB or higher is being turned to pure black, and with the white, anything lower than 5.95 is going to be turned into white. And it just crushes the value. You lose, you win the battle, but you lose the war. And you don't have all those fine details. So I'm going to be very careful with this, and maybe take the clip black and just inch it up just ever so slightly. Now there are other tools in here which are used here and there, like screen softness. You can see it just softens the edge a little bit overboard, and you can soften that up if you want, if you're getting sort of stair-stepped edges. And there's, you know, D-spot black, which just kind of does an erosion. You can see you're getting these very strange shapes here. Again, heavy tampering is something that you don't really want to do too much. In this case, we're just dealing with actually getting the cutout matte. I'm not worried about destroying the image here. So with that said, we have this piece of Keylight that looks good. This portion here actually looks very good. Now, what you would usually do with this is do a region per region basis when you're dealing with Keylight. And again, it's good because it's on a lockdown camera. So I'm going to take this Keylight, paste it, put in my source, and I'm going to go ahead and come in here, hold down Shift, Control, and Alt, resample my actual color, and I'll go up here by the hair up here. Right? So this is, I'll go ahead and label this, call this top head. I'll take this Keylight, go into my node, and label this, right side, which would be camera right where we're facing. And I'm going to go ahead and paste another one of these babies. Come in here, and again, choose my color. And again, I'm going to get close to the edge here. Let's see if we choose. See, it's we're going to be very careful here. There we go. So this would be more of the top left. So I'll go ahead and call that top left. There we go. And last but not least, maybe we should hit up this corner at the bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and over here, put the viewer in here. Again, change the information that I'm going to choose and get this area right here. Look at all the detail coming back the minute I kind of punch around. So this would be the bottom left. Okay. So let's start to combo these with a key mix, or so here is a key mix, and what we're going to do with this is I'm going to go ahead and put this to B, and A is what we're going to keep or in the mask. So A is what's going to be revealed in the mask. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the letter O to make a rotonode. And this is the top of the head, right? So I'm going to go ahead, take this rotonode, and let's go ahead. Oh, you know what? I had the gamma on while I was doing all those checks. Let me go ahead and double check my results here. Okay, so that's the top head. That's the right. Let's go ahead and maybe refine that a little bit. Another thing we haven't done is actually denoise our plate, which would probably be a good idea, but I'm not going to do that just for the sake of this demonstration. And so we have this right side, and then we got this top of the head, right? So it looks like this area. So I'm going to go ahead and do my best to grab this area here. I'm going to go ahead and hit the letter B and add a slight blur to this roto. There always should be a blur on all your rotos. So A is basically being added to B. So anywhere else is the B input, anywhere in this roto will be whatever is in A. So if we put those together, you can kind of see the difference here. And in this case, I can go ahead and come in here and maybe extend this out here. Right there. So you can see the blur. If we don't have a blur there, the transition can be harsh. So if I go ahead and put this blur down to nothing, you can see you got that harsh edge there. right? So I'm doing this kind of quickly, by the way, just so you're aware. So on top of that, you're daisy chaining here. So you take the input of B, and now we're going to add in this here, A. And let me just do one last adjustment here to this roto. But it's region per region basis, right? So I'll go ahead and get, let's go out that far. There we go. What the heck? We'll crush some of these values a little bit later if we need to. All right, so then again, here once again, we'll take this Keylight. We'll add another roto mask. So I'll hit O, copy and paste this blur. Plug that in, plug this in. And this is, of course, the top left. So that's this little segment right here. So I'll go ahead and throw that in. There we go. And it looks like this key could probably use a little bit work. I'm going to put my viewer to it. And just come in here and kind of get the best result I can, but still maintain those hair follicles. It's going to be a little bit tricky. See, the closer I get, yeah, we're going to lose some of this data regardless. Okay, so that being added on, you can see there, I'll go ahead and just extend this out. And again, this is probably not as optimized as you would imagine. Okay, and then we have the bottom left, right, which is this area. So again, I'm going to take another key mix. Paste it, B input, A input, O for roto, B for blur, or just copy and paste this blur, plug it in, mask it, and this roto I'm going to throw down to this area here. There we go. So it looks like it only got a hold of this area right here. And I can keep going with this, right? So I can say, okay, this area right here, I'm probably going to have to do a separate key for. I'm just being very careful to do very light keys on all of this. So I'll just make another one, and this will be middle left. So we'll do middle left. And we'll put that in, and we're keying based on the luminance change, chrominance change for each individual area. So I'm going to just hit this keyer, hit Shift, Control, and Alt, click the little problem child area that I want to get as close as I can before it starts to get goofy on me. Making sure I keep as much hair detail as I can. Again, copy, paste. You probably wouldn't use this many, key lights. Sometimes you would, obviously. And this is where IBK Gizmo actually does a lot of this stuff for you in autopilot. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this here, plug it in, and let's go ahead and take a look at our last viewer. I'll look at it here, and then I'll just add in this area right here. So I'm just kind of adding in little areas here, as you can see. And again, I'll just kind of bring this to the best I can. Now, obviously, this will have to be animated. If it needs to be animated, obviously, because the camera's not moving, you probably could leave these static. But if the camera had to pan or something, you'd have to animate it. So in general, I could come in here and create a merge node. And we'll go ahead and create a mask. So again, I'm going to hit O for roto. And I'm just going to come in here and mask around and make a garbage mask around our character as best we can. And we're going to have better robust ways of doing this later, by the way. And again, I'll just copy paste this blur, B input A, and we are going to set this to mask. So there we go. We got rid of all the gunk on the outside. At this point, we can hit the grade node and come in here and maybe crush the values a little bit here. We can come over here and play with, play with the multiply. Again, you want to set this to alpha, by the way. So make sure this grade node is set to alpha. And I can just come in here and just start playing, put my viewer to it, playing with certain options here. You can see I can play with the gamma, which will kind of eat into my thing here a little bit. I could also come over here to my blacks, start to crush the values just a hair. And then, of course, you got, you can try multiply. It's not, actually, it's not going to do any good unless you have weight clamp. So again, just a little bit of detail. You can see if I do a little too much, I'm going to start to lose all these fine hair details, but sometimes there is a compromise in that. So now that we have an actual alpha here, I'm going to go ahead and use a copy node like this. And we're going to go ahead and bring in the actual footage itself. So I'm going to go ahead and take this, and put this as the incoming RGB information, and then the A is going to be the actual, oops, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's right. A is the alpha information and B is the RGB information. And we're basically reformatting what is RGB and what is A. So if I go ahead and plug this through to the original image, like that, and we can go ahead and hold down Control and make a couple dot nodes to kind of come around to the opposite side here. There we go. So now you can see, if I take a look, here's the original footage, hit A, here's my alpha. And I could pre-mult this, so I'll type in, make a pre-mult. So I multiply the alpha by the actual RGB, so it cuts it out, and there you go. Now, just by looking at this, you can kind of go and say, wow, this could use some, come into grading here and crush the, this area, but we have so much of this green here in the actual object, and if we were to, say, put this on a background, if I were to go to my constant here, and let's choose a color here. Let's choose something like, I don't know, something brownish like that. And if I were to merge this, B for background, A for a top, you would see that we got a green halo around the character. Now, the Keylight is actually good on its own as a what's called a despiller. And usually within keys, we have the area that we key out, and we're not worried about the red, green, blue information. And then we have the area over here, which would be dealing with despill, which is getting rid of the green out of the reflections, because a green screen behind this actress is not only going to cast green on her face, around the edges of her, around her hair, it's just going to pollute it because it's light. It works, again, it bounces around like photons, and just, white areas absorb, or white areas reflect and black areas absorb, so you're not going to see a lot of green in her black shirt, but you will see it probably in her face a little bit. So Keylight on itself actually works as a good despiller. So I'm going to come over here, plug in my source, and I'm going to set my screen color on this one to 1 for green, and voila, we have taken out the green spill. Now, usually I come in here with the alpha bias of the red, because her face is red, and I'll bring this up to 6. Okay. You can see as I do that, there's more green being taken out of her face, and also her hair. You can see the difference. See that? Just by bringing this up 1. You can put this to maybe 0.55 if you want. You don't want her turning into a strawberry or a blueberry, which happens as you kind of fiddle with this stuff a little too much. You can see she's starting to turn into a blueberry if I go too nuts. So having an alpha bias of 0.6 I find is a good kind of balance. Again, if you need to push it, you can still see there may be some green tinge in her skin. And that's something you can get through using maybe a hue correct, but we're going to get into that later lesson. So this would be the redefined RGB. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and plug that in. Notice that the background information here is unbelievably, actually ridiculously dark, right? So we've lost the luminance because we've basically taken the green channel out. So one of the things we can do with that is actually come in here and use a merge node, and we're going to extract by clicking here for A, B right here, and we're going to extract using a minus operation. So hit minus the green information. This is the green information that we tore out of the scene. Okay, so you can see there's a lot of it in around her face here, in her teeth, because her teeth are reflective, and along here and here. You can see the shirt isn't doing that because black absorbs a lot of the light coming and bouncing around. So with that, now I can go ahead and hit M for merge. I'm going to hit SAT for saturation. I'm going to come over here, take the saturation, bring that down to nothing. So now it's just black and white information, but it is luminance information that we lost, and we're going to reintroduce that by putting a merge node from B to A, and we're going to set this merge node to plus. And now we have re-added the missing luminance information, but yet she is not green. So there is our final, commonly called the D-spill, or the red, green, blue information. And this is our alpha information. We merge that together with a copy node. And now when we merge this together, we have a nice looking background. Now, I don't want to jump any further than this because I obviously want to get into the other tools such as the Gizmo and the Primat. But a quick fix for the fact that this hair is gray, because the luminance values are different, and also the color is different, is you can kind of cheat this by going back to, say, your Keylight, and adjusting the red color influence. So usually I put this to 0.01 on the D-spill, and as I start to increase this, go back to the actual image here and just see what we're doing. You can see as I do this, I start to reintroduce a little red so that it's actually changing to match her hair color. See that? I'll go to the plus sign just so I can see, you know, everything together here. But you can see the difference here. You guys see that? Now again, I can really push this if I want to by dragging this pretty high, and this might start to change her skin tone, but this background image is matching to her hair, as you can see. So again, there's a lot of things you can do. You can also come in here and bring down the intensity of the mix here, but I just want to show you by making some slight alterations of the color information. I can go over here to this merge node. Now it's matching up a lot better, as you can see. We still have you know, color differentiation here between what is the backplate and what is not, because the information of the gradient of the alpha is still showing the backplate what's behind her, which is all determined by how we actually did our D-spill. So you can see we've matched her up pretty good, and if I just go ahead and scrub through, obviously in this circumstance you always want to put your viewer to the last merge node and put your second viewer to your original plate. You always do this. You always go back to your original plate. You want to go back and forth, look to see what you lost, and you can see we lost a ton of information here. So you can see here we've got all of this information here that's been lost. Oh my goodness, how do we get that back? Well, again, it depends on the keyer that you're using. One last trick I learned from my good friend working in the studio was where you actually color correct the background plate. Okay, so this right here, let's go ahead and take a look at our background plate. Here it is, right? It's just this stupid constant, right? What you can do is actually put a grade node in on this, and what you can do with this is, we'll go ahead and take a look at her hair real quick. I'm going to hit R, G, and B, and we can see the green channel is where we get the highest amount of contrast, right? So I'm going to do an old type of keyer, which is called just a regular keyer. So these are used a lot in kind of pulling out luminance-based keys as well as ground shadows. So I'm going to go ahead and put that into the original plate, and what it does is if I put this from, you know, we're not going to deal with luminance here, but I'm going to go ahead and put this to based on green keyer, right? It basically takes the green channel, okay, and floods it in to the alpha. So if I go ahead and take a look, if I hit A for alpha, you can see what we have here. So I'm going to go ahead and crush the values a little bit in here. And this is basically a gradient of the values from 0 to 1. Here we go. Now we also got to invert this. So I'm going to invert it. And let's see if we can play with this other bar. You pull out this other bar here, and it's kind of clipping that. You can see it's going to be very hard to extract this, all these fine wispies, but we're going to grab whatever we can, and the white is the area that's going to color correct. So I'm going to go ahead and make a dot node here so we can extend this, bring this down here, and bring this baby all the way down here. There we go. And I'm going to go ahead and plug this in. Before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and add a mask, so I'm going to merge this because I don't want to color correct everything. So this will be the incoming image, and then the A will be a mask or a roto that I will create. And that roto will be only around the hair areas. In this case, I can only isolate this area for now. I'll have to do individual keys that are just like we did with Keylight based on the luminance of these different areas, but I'm just going to use this area for an example. I'm also going to grab one of my old blurs here and paste that in. There we go. That way we just have, and I'll put this to mask. So now you can see we just have this area cut out, and I will use this as the mask for the grade for the background. So now you can see if I take a look, and I'll take the grade and start to multiply this down, look at all the hair detail that has come back in that little area there. So now I'm going to go back to my merges, my original, and my end of the line, front of the line. And you can see we've retained all this information based on a hack where we've color graded the background. Now, we've color graded it, unfortunately, in a color that is black. So you can come into this multiply here, click on the 4, and play with, if you want to make it more like the color over here, which might be a little bit more red. So you can kind of play with that a little bit. So you can go ahead and see the difference between that. You can see a huge world difference that this can do to retain values that you couldn't get out of your key due to quite the variation of the green behind the actress. So a lot of stuff I'm throwing at you. Okay, so the next thing I want to show you is the Primat. So the Primat, let's go ahead and drag this baby over here, and we'll bring our actress here. Primats are usually used for creating cores, which is very important to understand that despite all of this keying that we did, if I go ahead and take a look at our actress here, you can see if I pulled it down, she is, slamming the gamma, she is still transparent here. So if I were to sample this area here, you can see the actual value is 0.998, okay? So that is technically unacceptable in regards to an alpha input that you can play with here. It's a 0.05% or lower is what is allowed in regards to transparency for the most part, especially out here in this area here. You kind of sample here, you can see the value is like 0.033. That's fine. Even though we do see noise here, it kind of translates itself into not being seen in the plate itself. But if you get values in here out in the black area that are above 0.05, then you got a problem. So that's sort of like the middle ground. Even though you see gunk up here, like let's sample this. So the average is 0.02, right? So that is actually acceptable. That will not probably be seen in the final output. And we can test it just by looking at it, right? If you see sort of noise up there in your shot, then you know you got to deal with it. But in general, it is what it is. So let's go back to our Primat. Primats are just very destructive in the sense that it's almost like creating a key with a permanent marker. If you make one mistake, it's hard to go back, and I just find that the undo button is a bit buggy. So I'm going to go over here, plug in the foreground, and take a look at it. Now this is what I call three-dimensional keyer. What does that mean? Well, if I come over here to this nice little color wheel I've put in the scene for you, put my viewer to the roto here and double click my roto node, you'll see the Keylight was using a variation of luminance and chrominance to pick out an area. But the great thing about a Primat, it's a three-dimensional keyer. It almost like works like a wormhole, if you want to talk physics, where it can jump to different areas that are not connected. Usually as you increase the area that you want to key, it kind of grabs everything in the middle as you extend it out. But here's a way where I can actually grab, and again, this is the gradients of the tolerance of what it actually picks up. Actually grab stuff that's outside of that sort of diamond, so to speak. So it's really cool. It's a three-dimensional keyer. So let's go to the Primat here. I'll just double click it. And again, you have this option here, operation. This stuff is very dummy proof. You can go here to Smart Select Background Color, and just like we did with the Keylight, you're going to come over here and click a color. And boom, we've got a starting point. So let's go ahead and hit A for alpha. Let's go ahead and sample an area there. And now all I do is go to clean background and clean foreground. So I just go to clean background noise. Anything that should be transparent, I'm just going to hold down Shift and Control and gobble it up. As I do this, and you can do it by grabbing a whole area, but it'll actually it's starting to make your edge a lot crunchier. So I find that just clicking once in a while instead of clicking and dragging like this, can kind of save your key. So with that, I'll go back to my clean foreground noise and bring down slam my gamma here. And I can come in here and grab the center areas like crazy. Now you can see what's going on here. It's starting to harden up my matte really badly, okay? And that's just the reality of this whole thing. You can click on viewer here, and you can see the actual three-dimensional representation of what is being keyed out in the red, green, and blue channels here in the three-dimensional space, if you wish. It's nice eye candy, but it really doesn't help you very much. So now you can see everything looks relatively, blasé. If you were to merge this on a background, the edges would be a little bit harsh. So if you were to compare the edges of what we created with the Primat versus what we have in regards to what we did with the Keylight, you can see the amount of detail that's been lost. The good thing about the Keylight, or the Primat I should say, is it works as a great tool for actually creating cores, because it still maintains the edges, but allows for hardened centers. So you usually would come in here and again clean this up a little bit more. You'd probably grade it a little bit, so you can come in here and grade this. Oops, not a grain, but a grade. And again, you'd set this to the alpha channel. And you can come in here and crush the blacks a little bit. So you can see as I crush the blacks, starts eating into the matte. Crush the whites ever so slightly. And now you have, if you can slam the gamma, you can see we have a pretty solid center there. But this actually acts as a core that if we were to hit M for merge, we could actually, after this, merge this on top. So I'm going to merge that on top of the footage here. So I'll just bring this over here really quick. So here is our, Keylight, which has holes in it. And if I take in comparison between the two, you could see this is a little bit skinnier. Now this could be troublesome because these areas, obviously these areas are the semi-transparent areas, and this is fine. In general, you might also want to come in here and play with the gamma. As you can see, it kind of eats in a little bit more too. You can do that. You could also use a lookup tool, which I'm going to go over later. This, and I'll go ahead and set this to, let's put it as, well, let's just plus it. Now I want to show you what happens when you plus something. You get values that are above value of 1. So I'm going to go ahead and put in a quick clamp node here, like this, and now those values are no longer that. They're limited to between the normalized values of 0 to 1. Or you can go ahead, put this to, say, screen, which is usually a nicer way of working, and you can see the values are still normalized. So screen is actually preferred. But you see what it did is it filled in these areas here. So now if we kind of look at our, again, you can see we have a nice core, so it fills in the center. So that's why Primat is a really good tool to use through this whole process. And I'm just going to organize this just a tad so you guys can have it look, take a look at this. I do have the start and finish for all these files, so you're not like, what did he do? I could just go ahead and show you. So let's go ahead and take a look at the final result. And there she is, looking all joyful. We still have some green in her face, and these are the subtleties you got to keep an eye out for, as you can see here. And we'll get into how we're going to be dealing with that a little bit later. But as of right now, that's just a quick example. Now the final keyer I'm going to go ahead and show you guys is the IBK Gizmo IBK Color. This is the most popular in the whole process of keying and so forth. So sometimes it's hard to explain what in the world this does. So here is our actress. I'm going to go ahead and add a denoise while I'm here. So let's go ahead and add a denoise. Put the denoise in the source in. Sample up my area. And now we have taken out the noise in the shot. So if we go ahead and take a look in before and after there, noise is gone. We blurred the image a little bit, which we can sharpen her later on. Which if you sharpen too much, you'll get black edges around heavy contrast areas, and it's not good. So again, anytime you tamper with the image, you're tampering in God's domain, and you're fiddling around, and that can degrade the image and make it more synthetic. So we have the IBK Color and the IBK Gizmo. So what does this do? Well, I'm going to show you using a Roto paint node what the heck this does. So what it does is it takes the original plate, and this is going to sound really goofy when I kind of describe it. I'm going to take a smear brush here, right? And what it does is it basically does this. It's basically taking the sample color. You know how we had different luminance values all around her head because it's darker over here as it is lighter over here? Basically what it's doing is it's just doing this. It's choosing an edge and then eroding it in from that edge, as you can see here. So imagine, go ahead and make this crazy big. It's doing this. So it's moving the sample color here, which is most likely the color that should be sampled, and it moves it in to the character's center. And what we're basically doing is a process as if we got rid of her completely, okay? So I could keep doing this till the sun goes down here, right? So if you were to take a look, the difference, it was almost as if it's a fake backplate, or I should say clean plate. And clean plate, usually if you have a shot, if you're on the stage and you're VFX supervising and the shot is a lock-off shot, meaning it's a tripod shot lockdown, tell your DP to shoot some footage with the actor out of the way, and that footage can be used as a clean plate. But this creates the artificial clean plate, which is if we told the actress, get the heck out of the way, and we shot some footage. So you can see it looks as if she disappeared. I could keep doing this till she disappears, as if she actually is out of the shot. And all it's doing is smearing in the pixel values around here, and then it's using a difference keyer, the difference between the back plate and the original, and taking the character out. So what I like to call it a difference keyer. Okay, so with that said, let's go ahead and create that. So we don't use, obviously, a smear brush. We use the IBK Color, which we're going to plug into our Denoise. This thing by default is always set to blue. I don't know why they don't just set it to green, because most people use green and secondary blue. But it's set to green, and I think that's because the old software used to use blue screen more than used green screen, switching over from film to digital or whatever. So you can see the image you get is this very odd image here, where she is basically has an outline. If you hit A for alpha, it's actually choosing an alpha. So this is the best that it can do. It's basically keying out, basic green here. And what you have to decide here is the size. So you can see here, by default, 10 is usually fine. And then you have darks and lights. So this is basically in the same way we were doing keying with Keylight, defining out the tolerance of brightness versus contrast. I'm going to put this to 0.01, and I'm going to start dialing up this 1 until it kind of chews up everything. We want to get even those hair wisps if we can. Now, if you do this, it starts to explode off to the side of the screen here. So you can see it's like, oh crap, that's not good. So I want to kind of wait till it explodes and stop. And now I'm going to go to the lights and put a value in there on the greens. And I'm just going to start fiddling with this until I can get something. There we go. Now the next step is an erode. That just basically erodes in or dilates out the actual alpha edge. So now I'm trying to get all these hair details as best as I possibly can. Okay, so let's go ahead and fiddle with this a little bit. You can see if I pull it, I can overcrank it, 6, 7, 8. Scenes with heavy hair, lots of hair and not hard edges, are a little bit tricky. You might have to introduce a mask, which I'll talk about, I'm going to demo later on, where you actually introduce more to the roto by adding in more alpha via roto node. But the hairs are tricky. I would actually come in here and roto this area in and add it to the alpha mask, because it's no good. So you can see what it's going to do. It's going to take the pixels on this, where this line is at, smear them in. So you can see the patch black is going to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and drag that in, and I can overcrank this to ridiculous. Now I'm going to talk about the daisy chain version of this later on, but I basically brought this to a patch 20. So let's take a look at the original image. Let's take a look at the shot. It's almost like we told the actress, get your butt off the stage, and there we go. Now we're going to have problems over here with this hair. Okay, because it's going to use the difference between this and do the key. Okay, so here's the IBK Gizmo. I'm going to plug in my clean plate, which is this. Or if on set I told the cameraman, get the actress out of the way and film, and he gave me some B-roll footage shot temporally in a different time, I plug this in here because it was a lock-off shot. And now I'm going to go ahead and put this in my foreground and take a look. I hit A for alpha. Now again, by default, the IBK Gizmo is set to blue screen. You have to set this to green screen. Annoying, but look at this. This is like everything we did here, right? But done all at once with this node, because instead of sampling this area, this area, this area, this area, this area, this area, this is basically using a difference mat to get all the details for us all at once. So let's take a look at the difference of what we created here versus here. You can see the difference. Look at how much detail is in the IBK. I've talked to many of my students that are big-time VFX guys now, and they are they're still, this is the best keyer. So it saves time. And why is this good? Well, I did a commercial with Sam Jackson, the Capital One commercials I used to do, and you guys can look them up if you want. Chasm, Snow Globe, also Tiles. They're all on YouTube and so forth. But Sam Jackson is moving through a scene, and he is he's moving through a green screen stage. and the luminance is changing behind the actor. So this wouldn't, you know, a moving shot is not good for keylight, whereas a moving shot is great for the ever-changing background of the character in, say, using the IBK Gizmo. So with that said, you can see obviously we have some noise patterns here. If I sample it, the values are at 0.004. Right? Those are acceptable values, actually, believe it or not. Even though we can see the noise, those are still acceptable values to be used and overlaid. Even though people usually will come in here and they'll add a grade node, they'll set this to alpha, and then they'll start coming in here and crushing the blacks until it lose all the detail. But look at all the hair detail you're losing with that. See that? We've won the battle, but we've lost the war. So again, I'm going to maybe do just a little bit of cleanup, and even bring in the white point not as far as like 0.998, because we still have holes in our character. As you can see, this doesn't fill in the holes in the character too much. Well, in this case, actually, it does. It does pretty good. Again, I might bring this. I don't want to bring this too crazy. Maybe 0.97 or something. Did a pretty amazing job, as you can see. Now, we would probably come in here and do another, let's create a merge node. And we're going to create a O for roto. And let's just make a quick garbage mask while we're here. So just go ahead and throw like that on. Steal one of those blurs over here. Paste that baby on. And set this to mask. There we go. And again, I'll just blur this edge if I want. There we go. So pretty cool, and again, it gives a beautiful, absolutely beautiful result, from which if we were to swap this out, right, so I'll go ahead and swap out the A here for this input really quick. So we're basically doing all the work that Keylight did, except this time we're going to see the result using the actual IBK Color and Gizmo. And look at that. All those hair details are there. Now, hair can be a bit of a pain in the rear end with the IBK Gizmo, because you really, to collect the hair can be tricky, so I usually introduce some manually animated rotos to cover up all the hair when it comes to this area right here. So even though, this is the quick way of doing it, we're going to show you the daisy chain version, which works even more effectively than the whole process. So that, in a nutshell, is all the keyers. Again, you want to denoise it. You can also use this screen clean tool, but again, you got to don't get too crazy, because you'll start to lose details and the highlights, or as far as the motion blurs and the actual wispy hairs. But you can see how just these tools alone. Now, this is still not going to cut it. We're going to get into crazier, even more powerful keyers and despills to really make everyone kind of blend in. We got to talk about graining, regraining the image. I'm taking you guys all the way to the professional end, so that if you were to show up at, say, the Mill or any one of these studios, you would be ready to do keying at the very least. That's just one element of compositing, obviously.